become more productive, we're trying to become more innovative and make sure we're investing in the right things, that we're carrying out research that's going to help our manufacturing companies, and that we're making sure that we're skilling people and giving them the right capabilities to help us build our manufacturing sector. So as I say, it's very much that kind of joint effort. Strathclyde is the kind of host, if you like, of NMIS, but very much working with a good number of players. We're working with many people from Scottish Government, councils, Skills Development Scotland, Highlands and Islands, Scottish Enterprise, and a whole host of other organisations, including all the other universities in Scotland. So NMIS is a kind of new, is growing, but I should say you might have seen on the news and so on pictures of fancy new buildings, which is fantastic. But we're not hanging about waiting for all that to happen before we do anything. Very much kind of NMIS is operating right now. And some of the specialist centres that sit within NMIS, things like the Advanced Forming Research Centre, AFRC, and the Lightweight Manufacturing Centre, they're very much open for business. And the activity that we're engaged in just now, our Insights Online programme, is part of the outreach programme of NMIS. So we are very much open for business today. So with that little bit of housekeeping and introduction, I'm now going to move on to the kind of main business of today's topic, which is all about looking at new business models for manufacturing. The kind of things that I want to, this is a wee agenda of what I'm going to do. Now, obviously, because we've muted your microphones, I can't go into my usual interactive lecturer mode and ask you what you know about business models. So I'm going to guess that for quite a few of you, you're familiar with the idea of business models. And I'm going to apologise to you guys because I am going to do a short introduction to business models, because I'm also pretty sure that there'll be a good number of people on this call who don't talk about business models on a regular basis. So I want to make sure that everybody gets up to speed and we're all talking about the same thing. And then I'm going to talk a bit about why we need to revisit business models and how we should be doing that. And basically, we need to be doing it because things change. So I decided it was probably a good idea to use our kind of unprecedented circumstances that we're in just now, our COVID-19 lockdown, to illustrate how business models might be changing just now and in the future. And I'm going to pose the question about, do you think your business model might emerge differently? So having done that, hopefully I'll have convinced you that this is something worth discussing as a management team. That really the takeaway from today is I would like some of you to say, that was interesting. I'm going to get my management team together and have a conversation with them about business models. But before you do that, I would also like to introduce you to some trends, to some new business models that I think are emerging that you should bring to the table and make part of this conversation if you are going to talk about your business models going forward. So that's the kind of second half, if you like, of the webinar. I want to talk about some of these new trends. And again, hopefully that's a takeaway for some of you. Okay, so let's make a start by what do we mean by business model? And I've got a definition on this slide. As I say, I'll only spend a couple of slides talking about this. Very simply, a business model describes your organisation and the way that your organisation creates value. So your strategies, your markets, how it delivers that value to your customers. So using resources, your skills, your activities, your partners and so on. And then how it captures value, how it basically generates revenue. Or not everybody is in it for the money, there might be other ways of capturing value. So that's my basic definition of business model that we're using today. So we go on to my next slide. If I say that your business model is how you create, how you deliver, and how you capture value, you probably won't be surprised to see on this slide I've got what I think are the key elements of a business model. So these are the things that make up your business model, and these are the things that if you are going to have the conversation with your management group, that these are the things you need to talk about. So obviously, your customers are part of that. Who is it that you're targeting? The value proposition. Value proposition is, what is it that you're giving to your customers? What is it they value in your offering? Is it that you're the cheapest? Is it that you're the most innovative? Have you got the best quality? You've got to try and understand what is that value proposition. And then one that maybe some of you haven't talked about as much is customer relationships, and how you build these relationships and how you manage these relationships with your customers. In what ways do you interact with them? Do you interact with them directly? Is there a third party involved? Are you face-to-face? Are you online? These kind of questions. And linked to that is the channels that you operate in. You know, so are you providing goods direct to the customer, or are you doing it through retail outlets? Are you doing it online? These kind of questions. Your key activities are the things that you do. So your manufacturing, your design, your packaging, issues like that. And then the key resources. Now that might be, it might be your people, it might be your skills, it might be your equipment, it might be your facilities. And your key partners. Now that might be suppliers, it might be people that you develop things with, your innovation partners, for example. And then you've got your cost structure. Where are you spending your money, and your revenue streams? Where is the money coming from? So that's the basic things that we're talking about here in a business model. Now, I should stop and say, I'm introducing you today to probably what is known as probably the best known way of looking at business models. And this is the business model canvas, we call it. And it was put forward by Alexander Osterwalder back in 2010. Now, there's lots of other management gurus out there who talk about business models. And you might find that their language is slightly different to what I've got on the screen just now. This is very much a Osterwalder kind of way of talking about business models. But when you unpick them, really at the heart of anybody that's talking about business models, they're talking about these things. And I have to say, Osterwalder, when they put forward his business model canvas, I don't think it was rocket science what he was doing, but what he did was he kind of packaged it in a way that made it very easy for people to understand business models. So if I flick onto my next slide, I'll give you an example. This is Osterwalder's business model canvas, and up in the top corner there is a book that you can get hold of very easily online or by any bookseller. But there's a graphic of Osterwalder's business model canvas, which is just saying the same things as I had on the previous slide. Now, I'm going to move in to show you an example. Now, it's a very basic example of a business model canvas. And what I have here is one that I've kind of knocked up for a business school. So this is an example of where I've brought a group of people together who are involved in the business school to talk about what is our business model, what does it look like? And you can see if you were actually doing this in the physical world where we interact with one another, what I would have done is I would have put this template up on the wall, and you can download these templates, and there's lots of them on the internet, most of them are free. And what I would have done was I would have given my colleagues some post-it notes and said, right, I want everybody to think about who are our main customer segments. And they would have written things, put it up on the wall, and then when we were finished, we would have stood back and looked at our business model canvas and started to discuss, well, what have we all put? Where are there differences? Where's there similarities? But equally, you could do this in the virtual world. This one that I've got here is actually, you can use virtual post-it notes. One of the things that I really like about the business model canvas is you can have this conversation about what is our business model today, but then it's really easy to say to people, well, think about the future and think about in 6 months' time as we emerge from this, our lockdown, we emerge into a very different world. What might have changed? So again, you can give people the post-it notes back and say, have a go at putting up what you think. Is there new customer segments, for example? Or is it a different offering that we're putting up? And then you can do that for whatever time frames you like. You can say, well, let's look into what's it going to be like in 3 years or 5 years. Okay, so that's just a really simple illustrative example. Now, the slides are going to be shared and it is going to be available on YouTube, as I say, so you don't have to scribble too much. The next one that I've put up, I've borrowed from the internet. Just a quick search gives you lots of examples of other people's business models. And this is one that is about an automotive company making cars. So again, it's a more engineering one. I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but just to say it gives you some idea of the kind of conversations that you might be wanting to have. Okay, so that's the basics of business models. So now I'm going to go on and ask the question, why should we keep going back to our business model? And the answer is very simple, is because things change. And there's lots of things that can change our business model. It might be that the market changes. It might be our customers' preferences change. It might be about technology. It might be about finances. There's all sorts of things that can change. And what you should be thinking about, and I think what the business model canvas encourages us to do, is look and discuss things that are inside your business, your operations, but also think about things outside your business, about your partners, your customers, and so on. So my key message, so first message is, use a tool like the business model canvas. Use another one if you like, but that's probably the best known. And the second message is, keep revisiting it and keep discussing it. So I'm going to use our COVID-19 situation to illustrate this, why we need to revisit it. And of course, this question, has COVID-19 lockdown made us think and act differently? I'm pretty sure everybody that's on this call is going to say yes to some extent. I borrowed a little quote there. Jeremy Cox is somebody that I've worked with in the past. He writes a regular blog, and last week on LinkedIn he had posted a blog that included this little quote about how things have changed whilst we've been in lockdown, and I think that's very apt. So I've got two slides that I want to put up here, and the first one looking at how things have changed for companies, and the second one about how it's changed for everybody, for consumers and everyday people. So this was just a few that came into my mind when I was making up this kind of slide pack. And I think, in Scotland, we've seen a lot of people really kind of stepping up and getting involved in helping make things that we need just now. So starting with our brewers and our spirits manufacturers and others who stepped up and started making hand sanitizers when we really needed it. And again, there's lots of Scottish companies that have been helping out with PPE manufacture, whether it be visors or aprons or scrubs or whatever, for NHS, for carers and for frontline staff. There's a lot been going on in Scotland. And then there's also, it's not all about the manufacturing, there's also been a lot of designers and engineers in Scotland who have been looking at how can we design things that can be made easier and quicker and using less specialist equipment. So again, we've had a lot of companies who have been involved in kind of making, designing and making ventilators and parts for ventilators, whether that be big companies like Rolls-Royce or whether it be small companies that maybe make, I read an example the other day there about a company that normally 3D prints dental products, but coming up and getting involved, a Scottish company getting involved in making parts for ventilators. And then we've got companies like Omega Diagnostics over in Stirling, who have been at the forefront of looking at finding tests when we really need it. So there's a lot of businesses that have changed what they're doing because of the current circumstances. And then we've got people who aren't normally manufacturers at all, We've got communities who have started to make scrubs and visors and things. And that might be your local women's institute, it might be art clubs and things, but people actually turning their hand to making things. And then we've got the kind of creative entrepreneurs doing things differently. I heard a friend say that her hairdresser, for example, has been putting together home hair dye kits and doing a video with instructions and sending them out at £25 a pop. And apparently he's doing quite good business there. He's probably doing that for two reasons. One, to support his customers, his loyal customers, and keep them. But it's also given him an income at a time where he's had to close his shop. Or again, another kind of small business local example where I've seen my kind of butcher, baker, general store working together and delivering together. So people are working in a different kind of way. So if you think back to the business model canvas that I had up a minute ago, all of these people that we talked about have changed some element of their business model, maybe multiple elements of their business model. And for some, it's a short-term thing. They're doing it because of the current lockdown. For others, I think some of them might then start to look at new ways of doing things in the longer term. It might open their minds to new things. For some, it's about new customers. For some, it's about different value propositions. For some, it's about doing different activities, obviously, making different things. Or it might be working with different partners, like the example I gave of the corner shops. One thing that I think is really interesting that we've seen with a lot of companies is the kind of coalitions that are coming together. And I think Scotland's been great at doing that. So I think that's one to look at. I think sometimes some of these manufacturers that have been thrown together to work on things like PPE, they might now start saying to themselves, I quite like these guys, and maybe I'd like to work more with them going forward. We've got common values, for example. So I think we will start to see new partnerships emerging. So that takes me on to the kind of consumers, our everyday people. How have we changed what we're doing? And this is my kind of time capsule, COVID time capsule, things I'm doing differently. And I'm sure a lot of you will identify with a lot of these pictures. I'm certainly Zoom-tastic. And I read a figure the other day there that apparently Strathclyde University had 7,667 Zoom meetings last week alone, with over 50,000 participants spending 2.3 million minutes on Zoom alone. And it's not just about Zoom, we're Skyping, we're WebExing, we're WhatsApping, we're doing all these things, FaceTiming. And I think as well, a lot of us will probably feel the same as me, that perhaps you're getting to know your colleagues a little bit better, because in these strange times, we take the time to ask them more about how they're really doing. We talk about their families. Other things that have changed, generations are using technology differently. Seeing this kind of lockdown about to happen, I gave my own mum my iPad, and so she's been starting to use technology that she never has, and we've been having family online meetings and birthday parties for 7-year-olds and things in a virtual space. I've been changing the way I shop. I'm now a convert to online delivery. I've been spending more time in my garden. I've been eating more biscuits, not using cash, appreciating key workers, thanking my bin men, all these things. We're all doing things differently. Where I'm going with this is that for many organisations, elements of their business plan will have changed in the past few months. As I said, for some of it might be short term, for some of it might be long term. But now is a really good time to be thinking about your business model. As we come out of this lockdown, we're going in, let's be honest, we're going into very difficult economic times. So we want to make sure that we've got business models that are going to give us the resilience that we really need. But because we've been doing things differently, and because our customers have been doing things differently, it is a good time to stop and ask, how will things change as we emerge from this situation? Universities, a very obvious example. One minute I was teaching to students in packed classrooms, and the next, with lockdown, suddenly everything's moved to online. And it's making us question whether going forward, are we going to ever go back to the same classroom based approach, or will we be doing an awful lot more online? And I'm sure you guys in manufacturing are also asking yourself questions. You might have discovered key resources that you've got that you never even knew you had, skills of your people, equipment you don't use as much. And you might be starting to ask yourself questions about your supply chain and your partners going forward. The other question I think you've also got to think about is, when we emerge, we might emerge differently, but some people might not emerge at all. So some of your partners that you have been working with might not be an option when we come out of this. Another thing that I think a lot of people will find is employees might be acting differently. You know, having been a lot of them working from home, you might find that some of your employees are starting to ask about building more flexibility into the way that they work. So lots of things going on, which really is a reason to stop and look at your business model now. The next slide. So will our business models emerge differently? I think they will. On this slide that I'm putting up now are some of the questions you might have. And as I said before, what I would like to see some of you doing is bringing together teams, your management teams or your product teams, and having the conversation around business models. And you might be asking the questions like this, and asking questions about, have things changed in the short term, and how do you think they might change going forward? So as I say, I'm not going to dwell too much on this. The resources are there, you can come back to it another time. But what I want to spend the rest of the webinar talking about is things that I was thinking about before anybody had even heard of COVID-19. That we had started kind of looking at some things that we think were affecting manufacturing and that might have an effect on manufacturing companies in Scotland, and indeed maybe some of our industries. So the next set of slides is really talking about some of the big trends. So when you do have these conversations about your business models, maybe what I'm going to talk about next might give you some ideas of things that you maybe hadn't thought about before to add into this conversation. So some of the kind of new business models for manufacturing. I'm going to start with this manufacturing as a service. And some of you might, when you see this, think, oh, that's servitization. I know about that. And I think servitization is part of it. And I think we've got lots of examples of companies who have moved more towards a service offering. And there's lots we can learn from that. But for me, I think this term manufacturing as a service is more than that. Again, some people might say, oh, it's what she's talking about. Is it about contract manufacturing? Because again, that's been around for a long time. And my answer is yes, I think it is part of it, but there's more to it than that. So I want to talk to you about some of the kind of different flavours of manufacturing as a service that I think are coming our way. And when we talk about our business models, I think we have to decide how we're going to embrace these things, or if we're going to embrace them. I think the first thing is probably, some of the shifts in technology that have changed the way that we operate and shop as consumers is also coming to manufacturing industries. So the same way that we use Trivago to check for our hotels and look for the best deals, or the way we look at Uber and find, the transport that we'll get is there quickest. We're seeing the same thing coming into manufacturing now. Digital platforms are helping us to link up people that need things made with people that have capacity. And these kind of manufacturing as a service operators, you're seeing them at the moment in areas around manufacturing. So things like machining, 3D printing, there's products like Uber and Airbnb and Trivago out there for manufacturing. It's going to get bigger, is what I'm predicting. And I think what we're finding is that the digital platforms are enabling people to go on and say, look, I could be a partner who offers services. And it makes it easier for people that can go on and say, I would like something made. And it's becoming even as easy that people who aren't manufacturers can put up sketches and models. It might be traditional CAD drawings and so on. But then that kind of idea of what they want made is shared through a network, and it could be a big network. And then people it can be routed through the network. And if somebody wants it quickest, the algorithm behind it will send it through different suppliers. If you want it cheapest, it would go through a different route again. There's a lot of that starting to happen. We do it at home, as I say, we use rated people and Trivago and so on. But now I think it's coming into our manufacturing sector. And I think you as manufacturers have to decide if you want to be part of it and how. Are you going to embrace it and use it as a user? Or do you actually want to be one of the people who gets in early and offers up yourself having capacity? So that's the kind of conversations that I think you should start be having, because we are seeing companies who do this just now. And some that you might have heard of, Fractory.com is one where you can get quotes on kind of metal fabrication based on CAD drawings, I think, at the moment. But basically, it uses algorithms and it looks for people they trust in the network, what capacity they've got, and how fast and at what price can they make things. You might have seen in the media, and again, I'm looking largely at the kind of business press, that there's some big players that are coming to the market. The one you might have seen is Exometry.com. It's the one that I think we're hearing about real big global ambitions. They're talking about mega money being invested in that particular platform by people like Bosch and Dell and BMW and GE. And they're talking, I think, the last I read, they were talking about having around 4,000 partners worldwide. Now you can see how a platform like that could become, you know, for manufacturing, our next Trivago or Uber or whatever. So while you're talking about your business model, ask yourself, have you got spare capacity? Could you monetize this through such platforms? But be careful as well when you're talking about this. It does sound exciting, but bear in mind there's an awful lot of hotel operators now that don't want you to go to Trivago, they want you to come direct. So think about, if you are going to get involved, how can you make sure that it doesn't squeeze your margins? Okay. So I'm sure some people might have questions at the end, but I'm going to move on now to another kind of flavour, if you like, that, you know, it's related. The idea of zero capital factory. The picture I've got up on the screen just now is one of the images of the NMIS building that we're expecting. And the reason I put that up is because zero capital factory is something that I know my colleagues in NMIS are talking about. I think this particular strand is being led by Richard Miller and I think Michael Ward. We've all had conversations around this. And again, it's one of the many flavours, I think. Why is it important and what are we talking about here? Well, I think in Scotland, we're very clear that we want to encourage innovation and we want to encourage innovators to bring new products to the market. But not all innovators want to invest in factories. Not all innovators have the capital to invest in factories. So the idea of the zero capital factory is, how can we actually encourage people to get things made without having to spend the money on factories and facilities? You know, for some, it might be they don't have the capital. It might be for some existing companies, they actually want to not have their capital tied up in buildings and so on, but instead have the money that they're able to spend on research and development and spend more money on marketing type activities. So you're moving, if you like, from a kind of CapEx to an OpEx kind of model. So this is a kind of idea of zero capital factory, and I think it's one we're going to see more and more of. But it's not totally new. Again, there's examples out there of people using these kind of business models for years. At the high tech end, we've got semiconductors. Now, we all know that semiconductor manufacturing plants are, hugely expensive. So, for a long, long time, we've seen fabulous companies who are designing semiconductors and then getting them made in existing facilities. At the lower tech end, as you drink your wine Friday night or whenever you drink your wine, as you're drinking your wine, think how that was made. And again, if we look at a lot of the way that wine's produced in France and Italy and so on, it's the local companies that are growing it, but then they go to a shared facility to actually get it manufactured and bottled. And again, that's been going on for generations. Closer to home, I was doing some work recently with small breweries. And again, what's quite common there is they've got mobile canneries where the guys and girls are focused on making the beer, but they've got a mobile service that comes around and actually packages it for them. So again, they're not having to invest in the capital and equipment. So that's the idea of the zero capital factory. And I think it is kind of worth us thinking about a little bit more. You see, in some places of the world, it might be governments, it might be development agencies that are putting up the factories and providing the facilities that then can be shared by the community. But in other places, it's very much a commercial thing where a private company puts up the facility, or in other situations, it's kind of collaborations between producers. So I think, again, in Scotland, I think we do very well at coming together as a community, and this might be a new thing to actually explore. Our third trend that I want to talk about is the idea of on-demand manufacturing. And whilst I don't think we're yet at the kind of Star Trek replicator stage, I think we are moving slowly in that direction, and it is becoming something we're seeing more commonplace. Now, some people have rapid prototyping equipment in their houses. I've been surprised at how many of my students have been able to use home equipment to kind of step up and get involved in PPE development. But we've also seen a growth in local rapid prototyping facilities. So people, instead of placing an order and having to wait a long time for things to be shipped, they can get things quickly and to their specification very, very, a decent price. Or it might be that you want a new suit made. And again, we're starting to see kind of in some of the big malls and parts of the world, in Dubai and so on, you can actually go along and tell them what you want, and it gets made within a matter of hours. And additive manufacturing, there's more and more applications of additive manufacturing that I think we'll see move very, very fast here. And I certainly think that on the business side, you've got guys like Amazon and UPS. That's where they see things going. That's where they're investing their money. And again, we talked about Xometry earlier on. Again, they're another player in this on-demand manufacturing space, having bought up a number of players. So going back to your business model, really what I'm saying here is ask the question, is this going to disrupt your business? Is it a market you're in now? Is it a market you want to get into? Or is it services that you could actually use as partners? So this is my second last slide, I think, with just a few other kind of new models and new trends that I think are worth thinking about. The first one there being direct to the customer subscription services. Now, these have been around for a number of years. Probably the best known one is the Dollar Shave Club, because they set up sending out razors to users on a monthly basis, and they sold to Unilever for $1 billion a few years ago. But we're starting to see an increase in that, and I think lockdown has increased it as well. Some of you might be getting vegetables to your door, or the milkman coming again. So people starting to go into this kind of, I'll take a regular order. So it's another one just to throw into the mix when you're talking about your business model. Is that something you should be thinking about? The next one about the sharing economy, the circular economy. Many of you will have talked about this in your businesses already, and I think Scotland's doing a very good job in the kind of push for that. Examples being, again, I talked about working with the brewers recently. You know, the brewers, instead of kind of washing some of their waste down the drain, you know, passing that on and then using it in animal feed, for example, brings in a new revenue stream. And again, I could probably find you examples of companies where bringing in new revenues with the circular economy has actually ended up with the secondary thing bringing in more revenue than their primary activity. So I hope a lot of you are thinking about how we could do that. And then we've got customization and add-on services. And again, digital and data play a big part in that. I think companies that are using data well, it offers up, if they've got good data, if they've sold a customer perhaps a piece of kit, but they've got good data, there's new revenue streams to be made, helping them to use it effectively or to maintain it, for example, or monitoring. And then the last couple that I want to talk about is, a lot of you might have heard about the gig economy and flexibility of workers. And I recently did a project looking at manufacturing, productivity in manufacturing. And I was going out speaking to manufacturers all across the UK. And the thing that I heard most often was people saying they were worried about losing good people to retirement. So an ageing manufacturing workforce. So again, when you're thinking about your business models, I think we should be thinking about these things and thinking about, you know, some of these people perhaps don't want to work full time, but maybe they want to work some of the time. Is there a way that we can actually keep good people, but not the usual kind of everyday work? And I think this is a trend. It's not quite hit the UK in as big a way as it's hit the US yet, but in the US, currently 36% of the workforce are freelancers. And surprisingly, it's not all about the millennials. 1 in 5 of these are over 50. So I think that's a trend that might be coming our way. And taking it to the extreme, I know something else we've talked about with some of my NMIS colleagues is the idea of local hubs, and whether or not perhaps we encourage people to work from local places rather than doing big commutes and adding to our pollution problems. Should we be encouraging people to work together once we come out of this and we can work together in local hubs? So again, that's just another one I've kind of thrown into it to think about. So I've thrown enough at you, I think, for one webinar. These are all things that I think are interesting, investigating further, and I think should come into your discussions about business models. Certainly, there might be one of my colleagues from Dublin, University College Dublin, on the call today, because we've been talking about doing a little project looking at how some of these things might affect our businesses, manufacturing businesses in Scotland and Ireland. So that's a little project we're trying to get off the ground. But I'm hoping that some of you will take something away from this, whether it be the tool, the business model canvas, or whether I might have thrown some ideas that you might pick up in your discussions. So with that, I'm going to leave you just with, if you want any further information, there's a couple of references, a couple of websites. But again, don't be afraid just to get in touch. My email's on there, and Richard Miller that I mentioned with the Zero Capital Factory project is also on it. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I think Laura is probably going to put your microphones back on. Is that right, Laura?
Hello, everybody. Yes, thank you very much, Gillian. Yes, just to let you know, if you do have any questions at the moment, you can use the raise hand button if you're familiar with that, and I will turn your microphone on so that you can ask Jill a question. If for any reason you're unable to do that today, or you would like to ask your questions offline, please feel free to do so. You can see Gillian and Richard's email addresses there, or alternatively, you could send a question to NMIS-inquiries at strath.ac.uk. So I'll just leave you to see if you've got any questions for the moment.